Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Scot Harvath podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
Hey, I am riding high, not just because of this book being absolutely bomb, but we also posted our interview with Ryan Steck, the real book spy, over on the Mitrap podcast. Wasn't that fun?
Yes, it was. It kind of came between, the interview came between us recording part 1 and part 2, but in the meantime, I'd already finished it. We both had finished this book, and we just wanted to talk about it, but we had to take a break for that awesome interview. Got a lot of buzz on the socials. People are digging that interview. Finally, everyone can stop asking the question, why haven't we had Ryan Steck on the pod? Or you should get Ryan Steck on the pod. We had him. He was a great guest. Yeah, can't wait to have him back on to talk. We have so much more to talk about.
Yeah, we do. But, I mean, let's not get caught up in it because I am ready for Takedown, part 2. After being a little underwhelmed a couple of weeks ago, covering part 1.
It was
and
good.
You had warned
it was
me.
good.
It was good. It was good. It was good. But you had told me, you remember this being one of your favorite in the series, and I couldn't see why just yet. And then it's like a switch flips. Chapter 50, which is almost the exact midpoint of this book, this thing heats up and it gets rolling. And you're going to hear on the scorecard at the end of this episode, we've got some big scores, quite possibly historic on Mitrap Pod or on No Limits Pod. This is a good one, dude. This is a great one.
Big scores. You're going to love it.
You know what goes with those scores? And something we forgot to do on part 1, that was me sharing my thoughts on this book in the form. Guess what? In the form of a
limerick.
Ah, there you go.
Do we even get to the Amazon Goodreads part? Like, we just jumped right into it, right?
I think we just jumped right in. Yeah, so you got to do your numbers also. This one must have some good scores, I'd imagine.
Yeah, give me your limerick, though. I need to hear it.
There once was a man named the Troll. Destruction across Manhattan did he dole, hitting bridges and tunnels. As Scot and crew struggles, Takedown hits you hard in the soul.
Ooh, the Troll, baby. The Troll.
He's kind of behind all this, really. You know, he causes the mayhem.
He is, and I had remembered this, obviously we had just covered Rising Tiger, where we're way far into the future. His character development, obviously as a spoiler, as a sidekick, a compatriot with Scott, it almost becomes like his little brother in a sense, right? Scott eventually cares deeply about what happens to Nicholas. Do we even know his name in this book, or is it always just the Troll?
That's a good point. I don't think we do. He's just the Georgian dwarf.
Yeah. So, and I had remembered that his story started out as a villain. I couldn't remember exactly what book. Obviously, now we know. And like you said, Mike, I had remember this one being one of my favorites in my first read through the series. And as we were reading the first half, I was like, this is good, but why did I like this book so much? Like, it was solid, a solid story. Definitely wasn't losing me like, Path or like Blowback kind of were. It was keeping me engaged, but it just was like I felt like I was missing something.
Yeah.
And then literally right after our cutoff, you plow through the next 10 chapters and it's like, all right, we're let's fucking go. We are there. Yeah, no, this one has really good reviews on Amazon, 4.7 and a 4.28 on Goodreads. So a highly touted book in the series. And dude, would you say, is this our first time getting a cliffhanger in the series?
Yeah, I mean, that final scene, you mentioned the Troll. We get hints of Scot and the Troll building a personal relationship or understanding, even though we still think of him as the bad guy. There's some relationship building there. And then there's this drastic turn. It's almost like an epilogue. it wasn't an epilogue. It was chapter 106 or something like that.
Right.
But it definitely felt like an epilogue and both a prologue to the next book. The next book has to pick up with Tracy Hastings getting shot, holding that dog. Spoiler.
Oh yeah, no, I remember it does. You know,
it has to. Yeah.
I feel like this is a calling card or a trope, or I don't want to say trope, but a writing style that Brad is going to use, not all the time, but from here on out, it's almost going to be his signature, right? You know, Vince didn't do that this often, and Kyle's probably only done it once with, you know, at the end of Enemy at the Gates, right? You know, in a sense, that wasn't really a real cliffhanger. It was just like this crazy moment that happened, and then we're left to sort of think about it over the year. But this is a true cliffhanger. You know, this is, I don't know. I was vibing. You know, it definitely makes you want to, wow, I can't wait till next summer. You know,
oh, absolutely.
Like, I need this book now.
Oh, absolutely. And in a sense, to be honest with you, I almost felt like the last 10-ish chapters were part of that next story or part of that cliffhanger. I mean, come on. The New York attacks pretty much end at chapter 90 something or late 80s. And this book has 106 chapters. You know, we're going to Gibraltar. We opened up with the traveling heavy with Scott world bouncing. We got to end with him somewhere else. You know, Scott, I bet Brad almost felt like he spent too much time in New York City. He's got to go another somewhere. Location. Yeah. And then finding Muhammad bin Muhammad, who arguably could be considered one of the big bads, and taking care of him and tying up loose ends. It was kind of like, don't you think those sequences leading up to the final action, couldn't that have been the start of another book? Would you have been satisfied if this book ended with the New York stuff, the funeral for Bullet Bob, and them left wondering where the bad guys are? Ali, or whoever this terrorist is who saved Muhammad bin Muhammad and got him out of there. And knowing that the good guys are going to track him through this, how would you describe it scientifically, this injection that they can use to satellite track him. Doesn't that seem like it's building a whole nother book? And instead it's kind of tacked on at the end.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like we've read stories that have done that, right? Thinking off the top of my head, I feel like what's the book where we just talked about it with Ryan, where Mitch has to then go kill Stu Garrett at the very beginning of the next book.
Separation of power, executive power.
Yeah, and then almost like what's the one, Act of Treason? No, is that the one where the JCTC blows up?
Extreme Measures.
Extreme Measures. Yeah. You know that the villains get away, and then
they're on the run.
The entire next book is the villains being on the run.
Right.
You could almost see that Brad could have went that way, but I actually kind of appreciate this and what he did, giving us this a full wrap up, but then giving us a little bit more. Yeah. You know, boom, we're done with these characters. We're on to some other person in Scott's past who has come back into his life, and
that line.
You know, also at the same time, Scott probably thinks that it has something to do with the troll. You know,
yes,
the troll gave him this package, wanted to get him outside, draw him outside, and then boom, maybe that shot was intended for him.
But was it though? Because that seems so authentic. The fact that he was thanking him for saving the dog. I mean, no, it's definitely. All, but I don't.
It's definitely not. Else. It's someone else. It's someone else.
Scott
but
could
I think
it's
like,
him just playing a trick.
Exactly. So it's like, you know, we as a reader have a cliffhanger ourselves. We know something a little bit more than what Scott knows.
Yeah.
But then Scott also has a cliffhanger because he's not gonna know who did this, and he's immediately probably gonna think that the troll is the one behind it.
Yeah. Yo, because we're on it, let me just give you the absolute last paragraph of the book. And I think this is a lesson in how to end a book, to be honest with you. This paragraph
very good writing in this novel. Very good writing.
I feel like you could put a clinic on teaching people how to end books, because we've been skeptical of some endings. We've always said Vince, he had this rising action, and so the action as a whole at the ending he would nail, but sometimes tying up loose ends maybe could leave you something wanting. Scott, I did that twice. Brad as well.
I do it a lot.
Brad as well, we've had the same issue, but not here. So listen to this. Nuzzling the puppy under her chin, Tracy Hastings turned to go back inside, But before she could cross the threshold, a bullet with her name on it came ripping through the trees. As the weapon was disassembled, the assassin from Scott's past took a perverse pride in knowing that this was only the beginning of the pain and retribution that was coming Harvath's way. Harvath was about to learn that you never buried anyone unless you were absolutely certain they were dead. Zing. That might be my favorite ending in a book we've read in a long while.
Yeah, no, it's pretty intense, and I feel like I like how, we've got into some other Brad books, the recap at the end, almost regurgitating the story.
Yes.
And that was like one of our big, probably our only real negative in Lions, right? That we got that at the end, and we got it again in Path. And I think like we're seeing Brad's progression as a writer to see like, all right, well, I didn't like that, or maybe that doesn't work. My readers are smart enough that they don't really need to have that. And instead, we're going to tease you for the next book. And I really enjoy it. Like, we are seeing his progression as a writer.
Yeah.
And I think we're in store for the next couple books to be very, very pleased.
100%. I was almost nervous Brad was going to do that again, especially when the limousine pulled up with Secretary Hillerman.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's that. In the past, like his first or second book, that whole scene in the limo would have been a recap.
It would have been like 8 pages recapping the story and telling us where we're at, and I just wouldn't have needed it. But instead, that conversation here fills in the gaps for Scott, because we know Scott doesn't have the whole picture. And so that conversation is quick, it's snappy, and it moves Scott onto the next mission. I think just the line after, he's in Gibraltar on the ground or waking up with Tracy. So it's like that conversation, I think Brad learned, keep it quick, keep it snappy, move us on to the next thing, and connect the dots in a really economical way. And it landed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've been looking ahead. Can we look back for a minute? Because
I know.
we missed a few things. I think we went so long on part 1, and we weren't sure exactly where we were going to transition, that a few of these scenes in the very early middle part of the book got lost. But man, we missed some bangers of a scene in the first half, especially that one in the Lincoln Tunnel. What'd they call it? Like the safe box or something? That safe room?
Yeah, it's like this like specialty room that's off to the side. You go down this one hallway, and I'm trying to this is where you really start to feel that these places can only exist in a city like Manhattan, or like an LA type place. And that's where like the whole feeling immersed in New York City started to come out. I still feel like we didn't fully get it, later on. It sort of transitioned to mainly focusing on action and sort of plotting us along.
Yeah.
But man, that scene with the dog, and like the dog's like not even mentioned ever again, but it was just crazy that they trained this dog to literally go in with an explosive vest, rip it off, and know to like bolt out of it. Like, fucking insane.
And the whole idea was to lure the Marines out of this hiding spot, where it turns out we're going to learn very quickly about the Athena project to gather data and intel, have these information processing centers that the NSA is using to spy. But like, so yeah, under the Lincoln Tunnel, and there's a nugget later about history I know to be true, and I'm really wondering if this one is, because Brad writes that this room was designed as an evacuation center in the case of nuclear attack for the top brass at the UN to evacuate by submarine. So down in the tunnel, they can get on these escape submarines.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, can you imagine if that room is down there, seriously built into the Lincoln Tunnel? That's baller.
It's knowing Brad, it probably is a real place,
Well, the other one is the secret elevator garage down to the tracks off of Grand Central Terminal. So the next, data processing info center the terrorists hit. FDR, that was how he came into the hotel when he visited New York City, so no one would see him in his wheelchair up and down the elevator and going into the lobby. Yeah, and actually his whole entire limo could come off the train, go up a secret elevator directly into the hotel garage, and that garage had a secret passage also up into the hotel so you could bypass the lobby. And it all is built on these abandoned tracks just off of Grand Central Terminal. So Brad, man, he's doing what Brad does best.
That kind of stuff is super cool. You know, harkens back to like the what was in Interlaken, like describing that, you know, the
mountain,
the mountain gondolas that go up in the train stations like that. Like that's where he shines. You know, obviously his background as a travel writer, travel enthusiast, and knowing to pick out little tidbits like that, little bits of history, sprinkle it into work it into the plot. You know, that's where you gotta love Brad. You know,
it's a Thorism. Yeah,
definitely.
Thorisms are alive and well here. The cliffhangers, the traveling. He does it early. He does it at the end. The women, you know, next one up. We're just rotating, cycling through Scott and the ladies. You know, I'm not sure I like that too much, but it is a hallmark of early Thor. And I think you can use that then later on when Scott feels age and time creeping up on him to want to be a little bit more serious down the road. But yeah, right now we know it's early Thor where Scott is not even thinking about settling down. He has some thoughts in the back of his mind here about another job and is thinking about possibly moving on. I thought it was cool he was considering Valhalla, going to work out west in like a training center and basically train the next generation. That would have been pretty cool, but the events of this book and the ending of it, there's no way he's retiring to that life yet.
Yeah, it definitely like causes him to think about it and almost re-up on his commitment and realize that his work is nowhere near done yet, and he can't think about that kind of stuff.
Nope.
So one other thing we missed from last week, we touched on like the ballerness of the president. We missed the scene with Treehouse's resignation and how like the back and forth between the two of them. I don't know, that scene was fucking awesome.
Almost Flynnian?
Loved. Yes, very, very much so. We pointed that out a couple times, and definitely when you're listening to the audiobook and you hear George read it, you know, I felt like I'm with President Stevens or Alexander. Yeah, I felt like I'm with an Alexander or Stevens.
Yeah, you definitely feel like this could be an Alexander White House. And here's what's really cool is it's not just here's my resignation letter. It's like, oh, put that away. You know, let's wait till the crisis passes.
No, give me that.
Yeah, he's like, I'll take that. Bye. See you out the door. And Treehouse thought he would play hardball, and he thought he'd have a little negotiating power there. And Rutledge just says, no, now's not the time. If you're not all in, you're not all in. Bye. And what I love is the depth, though, because you could just leave it there.
Do you have the quote where he's like, but you can have it, but I'll stay, you know, through this crisis. And I think he says like, no need. Yep. I'll sign it right now.
Yep. He just takes out the pen. Exactly. But the depth is there because Chief of Staff Chuck Anderson is there in his ear, and he kind of berates the president over this. He's like, in a time of crisis, we need unity and trust in your government. And so you're always going to need that voice talking to you about the optics, about the press, questioning your decisions, not questioning your loyalty, but questioning your decision-making just so you can make sure you're confident with what you're doing. And so I really like Chuck Anderson. I think he's written very delicately where you could see him as a pest or a thorn to Rutledge. But I think we as the audience could pick up on these small clues that Rutledge needs that. You know, he's so gung-ho in the mission. He needs that voice. He needs somebody just putting things in place and putting in things in perspective. And one other time I love where Chuck Anderson does that is when he's arguing about going to New York. Because I do want to ask you about Bookbag and Amanda. Is that her name? No. Oh, no, she's Goldilocks. You know what Bookbag is? That's the president's daughter's Secret Service code name in The West Wing.
Bookbag. That's funny.
Oops. Yeah, this is Goldilocks. Well, I wonder if we needed her whole story, but I'll save that. Remember when Chuck tells the president you can't go to New York, and he's like hell I'm going. My daughter's in a coma. And Chuck brings in the Secret Service lady outside the door and has her explain to the president why he can't go. And she just makes a really good argument like, you'll be seen as using your resources for personal gain, and that will make people think you're not serious about responding to this attack and helping the victims. And so like Chuck knows how to pull the strings the right way to get the president to do what he wants, but not in a Stu Garrett kind of way, in a true like check your leadership in this moment of crisis be the voice of reason you might need.
Yeah. And you mentioned Goldilocks. We don't ever actually get any conclusion with that at the end. That was definitely was that really needed? I guess it adds a little bit of suspense early on with the attacks. We're sort of to cut away from Scott and his action to actually see something happening. It's almost like a very, very coincidental placing the president's daughter in the location type thing. But I'm glad that it almost like it was there, but then it didn't end up being like a trope at the end where Scott had to save her life,
Yeah. I
wouldn't
have wanted
it just
that.
It just existed, she was there, she happened to be hurt, sort of just add some context to heighten up the attack. So in the end, even though while it was kind of a loose end, I didn't mind it as much. I didn't really, it didn't like stick out to me as much as if it had come to be like a major thing where now all of a sudden the assassin like kidnaps her in the hospital to try to get, draw Scott out. Like that would have just been, freaking crazy. Yeah.
I was waiting for that though, and I would have been disappointed. I was waiting for Scott to just randomly go off the terrorist chase because he felt so compelled to go help Amanda in the hospital or whatever, if he heard of an attack there, and then he's torn between which way he had to go. It would have been cheap. It wouldn't have added to the story. It would have detracted, if anything. So I think you're right. You leave it there to bring a little bit of the personal. It added probably the best action sequence as the bridge was kind of collapsing in part 1 with the Secret Service. So it added good action to the beginning. And then again, it didn't distract from the story. So yeah, as a coincidence, just to say, look, real people were hurt here. There were human consequences to the attacks. Sure. I'm not going to ding it, but I don't know if it was entirely necessary.
Yeah. So there's some other really good scenes in the second half. Obviously, I want to get into the whole attack at the Grand Central Station and that aspect of it. The Waldorf Astoria. It's part of the Waldorf Astoria too, right? That's the building they're in.
Yep.
And the church scene. But there's also this other story that again was a little bit of I guess we got a little bit of clarification at the end. But the Lawler like trying to discover like what's going on, trying to help Scott out in New York City. But that scene between him and this guy at the NSA who we've cut to him a couple times and didn't strike me that this guy was going to be in any way fucking psychotic. Potentially he may be the mole who was leaking stuff to Nicholas, to the troll. And Gary's able to coerce his military Marine buddy or use his connections to this guy who's in the Marines, get him to talk, tries to bring in the NSA guy, immediately starts, he's just like, well, if you're not going to say it, I'm going to say it. And then the dude gets fucking got. I'm cursing a lot on this pod. I'm sorry. He gets got. That scene was crazy.
The scene was intense. For all the really cool New York stuff that's happening and about to happen in the last third of this book, I stand by that the Gary Lawler, Bill Forrester, and the guy from the NSA, Stanton, their scene, whether they're in an office or whatever, or I feel like they're on a rooftop at one point.
Yeah, they're in like some like special building out in like Virginia.
Yeah. That scene, to me, unlocks the whole book. It's unreal. We get to see Gary Lawler being Gary Lawler, making phone calls, pulling strings, and drawing connections. Mm-hmm. This book doesn't have much of a Marcus Dumond analysis guy. It has, what's his name? McAuliffe, that we call every once in a while. But we need somebody to be that Irene Kennedy and Marcus who can pull pieces together and see the bigger picture and spot the patterns. And Gary Lawler does that when he realizes the Marines getting hit at all of these stations, the Diamond Store, the Transcon Enterprise office, and now the Lincoln Tunnel. Gary's like, Marines are dying here. Why are Marines guarding this thing? Looks into their files and actually sees that they all requested highly targeted embassies, so really risky postings around the world. So they were the best of the best. Their applications were all written by this one guy, giving them recommendations for these postings, Bill Forrester. And Gary goes to see Bill. Bill's like, losing these Marines, he finally decides to talk because the Marines are getting lost. And Gary tells him, we could save more of your guys that you recruited. So he pulls in his boss or his confidant at the NSA, Stanton, who's behind this whole plan. And when Forrester starts running his mouth and spilling the beans to Gary Lawler, Stanton can't have it. Stanton doesn't want anybody else read in because he's secretly behind this whole project. And dude, so Stanton shoots Forrester. Lawler pulls a gun on Stanton. They have a shootout. Gary pulls out that pepper spray grenade. He tosses it into the room. He's telling Stanton to come on out. He ultimately has to shoot him. It's just, that scene unlocks the book for me and like so many parts of the plot. Because now I'm thinking, was this whole thing really about Mohammed bin Mohammed? Is it really about housing a terrorist in New York? Who was Stanton working with? Why does he want this project kept so tightly under wraps? Does it have to do with Operation Driftwood, which we heard about that the president signed off on? And I'm just like, it's almost adding to the mystery box, which should confuse you even more, but it's also advancing things where there's going to be a massive blow up and these mystery boxes are all going to be revealed, and this Stanton guy seems to be the link.
And I feel like we've read novels where there's been a lot of, cut scenes away from our main character, away from the action, and I felt like it's detracted from the book. But in this case, it enhanced it. It pulls you in. Like I didn't mind like leaving Scott for a little bit, and going to this, going to the Jaffe and the Marine. What is his name's Harper, right?
Yeah.
Like those interrogation scenes, cutting to the terrorists, like cutting to the president, his reaction, like all of it is just adding to the suspense, adding to the momentum. Really, really enjoyed those things.
And right when it teetered on being too much, and you're like, how the heck does all this connect? Right when you're like on that precipice, Ali Syed realizes, he goes, wait a minute, I'm being used. The Chechens are secretly collecting data at all these information sites. We're not finding the terrorist. We're not finding Mohammed bin Mohammed, who he's trying to release. He goes, damn it, the troll was using me to collect all this intel that the U.S. government is secretly collecting, this research thing, underground research facilities. He's like, I was used, and the Chechens are probably going to kill me in the end. I'm the expendable one, and I don't even know if we're going to get to the last target where Mohammed bin Mohammed actually is. He's like, fuck, I got to change the game. And as soon as he puts it all together, we put it all together, and then he shoots the Chechen, and we're like, oh man, now he's on his own. What's he going to do next? And that's when we eventually get to Libya House. But man, there's a lot before we even get there. But it just shows right when you're about to say, this is too much, I don't know what's going on, I'm lost. Boom, the Stanton reveal happens. And then that changes the gears in your mind. And you're like, I still don't get what's going on. Boom, Ali Syed realizes what's going on. So it's not you being told what's happening and you're not being told what to believe. We're being surprised as the characters themselves are being surprised.
Right. It's like in movies, you want to show it instead of saying it. But
exactly.
I mean, here you have to say it, but it's like, don't tell me what it is. Like, give me some nuance to it and weave it into the story, like Brad does it perfectly here. Yeah. So while this is happening, right, we mentioned the scene that we missed last time with the dog in this tunnel. So the information that Lawler has, he is able to convey to Scott, all right, well, this is a third location that you need to go check out. Obviously, Scott and team, they went to the other two locations. They go to this third one. And it's here where they meet up with two other Marines who just happen to they almost get in a little bit of a firefight, who we're supposed to do on shift duty. And this, whatever this secret mission is, right, Driftwood, Project Driftwood, right, that's going on, it's so intense that even the Marines won't give up the fourth location, like where potentially these terrorists are going to be hit next. And it's only out of sheer, the fact that the one guy has his brother is at the fourth location, and he has pity for it. And obviously there's a little bit of Marine connection between him and one of the other members of Scott's crew that they're able to find it. But yeah, the one guy is so pot committed to his mission, to his orders, that he will not give Scott the information.
there's a lot of commentary on the Marine Brotherhood and ethos. It's both on Scott's people. It's these Marine guards who were essentially duped and, didn't know what they were doing or protecting. I think one of the Marines is also the assistant to Mike Jaffe, who works for the DIA and is Mohammed bin Mohammed. And there's just a lot of commentary on what it means to be a Marine here. And what brings that home? Did you read the acknowledgments at the end? Brad's, thank yous. Really meaningful that they were at a fundraiser charity event, and the biggest donor on the night got to be named after a character in one of the books.
Mm-hmm.
And when the person who won as the biggest donor at the charity event got on the mic, Brad explains they instead didn't want it to be their name. They wanted the character to be the name of one of the Marines, the fallen Marines that they were there honoring as part of this event. And it's just so meaningful that that character is written into a book that's very heavy on commentary about Marine loyalty and brotherhood. And he's also the character who questions the guy on whether or not it's right to just accept orders and torture, and to go down the rabbit hole of, I was just accepting orders, so evil is permitted then. But no, this Marine stands up and says, to be a Marine is not just to accept orders blindly and commit acts of evil. It's to do what's right and to use your judgment. And I think that was Harper, in the end, who is one of the heroes at the Libby House. So all that Brad's doing something special in this book that just transcends an action story. He's really, really doing something different that we haven't seen out of him so far. Maybe we saw it with the Secret Service, his reverence for the Secret Service in
Lions. In the first book. Yeah.
Yeah. But I feel like we haven't seen a deep level of reverence for our operators. And also with Tracy Hastings as the EOD person, the sacrifices she's made, losing half her face to a bomb she didn't know how to defuse and having to deal with what could I have done differently, or what was I lacking that let the terrorists win. And then this whole team, after all, Scott's whole team, I know I'm rambling here, but it's basically a psychology group. It's a group that needs to lean on one another for support and transitioning out. And all those lines about how the doctor told Scott, hey, can I trust this team? And the doctor says, 9 out of 10 times you put these people who have all these problems on the home front, you put them back into action, you can trust them. There's always that 1/10, though, if you don't know in the moment how these psychological factors will weigh on them. And Scott asked the doctor, well, what do I do in those moments? He goes, there's nothing you can do. They just are going to be who they are, and that's going to come through. And in the moment, he thinks Tracy abandoned him, when he's standing on this bomb and she has to defuse it. But no, she's really thinking outside the box to save him and make up for the mistakes she made on the first bomb, which caused her to lose half her face. So there's just a lot of this deep appreciation or reverence for all these different people, whether it's an EOD specialist, whether it's these Marines, whether it's intelligence gathering. This is a special book.
Yeah, and I think it's important that Brad placed, this group of PTSD survivors. All of them have scars, both physically and mentally, as the ragtag team of heroes. And even Bullet Bob, who he had to be discharged because what was his shoulder or something like that, and to give him that send off. And to have him be the one, you kind of could see it going. I texted you a little bit early because I had read the chapter and I was like, oh shit, I thought you had finished the book already. And then you had texted me back. I hadn't got there yet. And then when you got there, I kind of could see you had even wrote down that Bullet Bob's probably going to die.
You saw that in my notes.
Yeah. And it's, I think it's important that these characters be who they were, and that, this team, that's that scene in Grand Central Station with the pressure plate and the bomb. This book has a scene where Scott steps on a bomb and it has to be defused, on top of every other thing that goes on. Yeah. That's crazy. And it wasn't out of place. It was obviously, these two people were bomb makers, so they're going to have something like that, potentially up their sleeve. And I don't know, just the tension that chapter gave, and then obviously it gave some clarity between who Tracy is and the budding relationship that was short-lived, unfortunately, between her and Scott. I don't know. It says something to have the main characters and Scott's team be who they
Scarred.
were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That scene also brings some levity because there's so much pressure. There's the pressure of the bomb actually going off if Scott shifts his weight. It's a pressure bomb. There's the pressure of him knowing Tracy cracked last time and she let the bomb go off and she paid the price for it for the rest of her life. He's got to walk her through that. He's got to calm her down. And then there's the pressure of their relationship. And it's really delicate because in that moment, you don't want to crack too many jokes. You don't want it to be like a Marvel movie where it's like you're going to say something dumb and funny and have slapstick right in the heaviest moments. You don't want to cheapen it, but you also know she needs that levity to operate and get over her demons. And so Scott says something, like, hey, this bomb can't go off because then we wouldn't have our night of dancing and good conversation. And she's like, well, I don't know about the good conversation, but definitely dancing. And it's just very playful while they're doing that, which is so human. As much as I love this team, and you're right, just to mention how I knew somebody was going to die. And
yeah, you knew it.
I sensed it was going to be Bullet Bob. You saw it coming.
I was guessing either it was going to be him. I obviously I couldn't remember. It was going to be him or one of the other male figures because I had to remember that Tracy, her and Scott had a quick thing at the end of the book.
Yeah.
So,
well, I knew it was going to be somebody, and then when I think it was Morgan, one of the random guys on the team, goes down in the church, I'm like, okay, well there it is. We got it out of the way. But no, he survived. They bandaged him up, and he kept moving. So as soon as they got him out of that church and he kept operating, I was like, somebody else going to have to die. I was like, somebody's going to have to die. And yeah, it was Bullet Bob. So what'd you think about, so they get out of the bomb situation in the hotel, the terminal, the Waldorf Astoria. There's a massive explosion out front, which one of the terrorists causes by shooting up the gas tank of a truck as a diversion to escape. And then the terrorists think they'll be safe in this church. And I don't know this one specifically, even though I'm from New York, St. Bartholomew's. I really got the sense that the setting and the description we were waiting for and looking for came through here. It came through with under the Lincoln Tunnel, came through in Grand Central Station and the underground terminal, comes through in the hotel, very New York style feel of the hotel.
Yes.
And then it really came through in this church, I think it was like a Romanesque style church. So you're feeling the heavy walls and stone. And
where else would you get a church that has this secret, underground passageway that then connects to the dry cleaners next door? Yeah. That's just a very I just imagine I've spent a little bit of time in New York City, but I see movies and a lot of times, the way New York City is depicted, like someone walks out of a restaurant or out of their apartment complex and boom, there's people, doing, vendors, or whatever, it's just a obviously very busy, congested, and everything's sort of interconnected and stuff like that. I totally agree with you that sort of as we get past the, the Central Park scene, we begin to see more and more of Brad layering in, the nuance that is New York City.
Yeah. There was enough of it. I would say it's not perfect. It's not exactly the feel I would have wanted in a New York City centric novel, but it's not as much as
like Switzerland or
right. I felt like I was on the meadows of Switzerland.
Exactly. Or the descriptions in Salt Lake City, right, that we got.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just the amount of time that Brad has spent in those places he's more familiar with, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess while this is going on, right, Jaffe, Harper doing the interrogations, eventually Ali figures out there's a fifth location. He's got to go to this place, and we finally figure out how and why they bring Mohammed bin Mohammed to New York City. And the whole time I'm racking my brain, all right, so they couldn't send him to a black site in another country, but then as soon as they bring him into U.S. soil, they're how are they getting around this? And then boom, it clicks. Like you said, all these mystery boxes that are slowly being opened up. And so they secretly brought him in on a plane, international airspace, and literally like helicoptered him like through the air and then just dropped him on the roof of what would be, technically Libyan soil, right? So technically it's not the U.S. And so this is the Libya house, which is where they're doing all of this stuff. And I like the little intricacies, like how they figured out like where to go, like because it's dialysis machine and like because that's like a real intelligence gathering that people would do. It's not like this fake bullshit intelligence gathering. Like you could see, in a movie like describing how they figured out where. They even mentioned like that's how they figured out where Osama bin Laden was, right?
Yep.
So
and here,
or I guess they don't mention it here, but I remember like reading about that.
No, they reference it. They say they were surprised because they were tracking this company who makes the dialysis machine, and they ordered 2, and everyone thought it was one for Osama in 2 different locations. But no, it was one for Osama and one for his master bomb maker, Mohammed bin Mohammed. So they even reference the dialysis machine was tied to Osama as well.
Right.
So those nuggets of truth come through. And here, Gary and team is able to trace the other machine to the Libya house, because it was shipped to the Libya delegation to the UN. And that's when he's able to tell Scott, I know your 5th location you got to get to, which is right when Ali is headed to the 5th location, because that was on the troll's list. And the troll, who knows, was the troll going to give Ali a chance? Well, like, why did the troll give the 5th location to Ali if it was the true location, if he really was just going to have the Chechen off him, I
think he wanted to dangle it to him. I think he was going to dangle it to him and then have the Chechen sort of turn there, like have them kill everybody and then turn them over to whoever. So yeah, I think that was because he mentions at the end that he sort of went along with this because he saw that Muhammad, right? He has like this special connection with Muhammad bin Muhammad, right?
Yeah,
he was abused when they visited that brothel, right? So he had a personal connection to take him out.
Yep, exactly. Man, the Libya house, just so much happens, but to sum it up, Jaffe and Bill Harper are going to work on Muhammad. They pull out.
Dude, this scene is fucking crazy. Crazy.
This might be the worst interrogation method I've ever read. I think this tops Jack Carr using those, like, all those different pepper mixtures and the capsaicin that he puts into the guy's veins, because this time it's going up the wee-wee. That is insane. Pepper spray injected in the urethra. Like, who comes up with this stuff? Brad, you are a twisted man.
Very twisted. And as I'm reading it, it immediately clicked. Like, this is a Carrism. Have we come up with that term yet? But it is. It's definitely something that Jack has intertwined, finding new and inventive ways to kill people or torture people in books. Man, yeah, I was reading it. I was kind of hurting. I was like, ooh, like that would not feel good at all.
No. Oh, God. He survives it, though. And, okay, there's a couple of tricks in this action scene that are out of control.
It gets very chaotic. Not like chaotic where, like, at the end of Order to Kill, I was, like, kind of confused. But just, like, Brad's able to, like, bring me back in and really explain it well, while the action sort of being all over the place.
I mean, he takes the ambassador, puts him on the elevator with an IED underneath him while he's bleeding out and he's dying, sends the elevator down to where he knows the other guys are, the guards, and as they come over to see the body, he's still breathing, but he's actually trying to tell them, go away, and they flip him over. Boom. The elevator drops, the shaft just drops out. The IED goes off, kills these guys. I mean, it's just pure chaos. It's up there. Would you say possibly the best action scene? I don't know how I would say the best action scene of this book. There's just one after another, and they're all really well crafted.
It's really hard to pick. I'd probably have to pick the whole Grand Central thing, like starting with the entrance in the cool underground train station, and then ending with Scott having to defuse the bomb. Like, all that is pretty sick.
That was a good sequence.
But yeah, it's tough. It's a tough call, which is a good thing to have. Like a multitude of action scenes to sort of argue over what could be the best.
Yeah, this was a good one too because you got Bullet Bob dying in the garage. You've got them going up and down the stairwell. You've got Scott rolling underneath like the closing garage door to shoot at this Mini Cooper as it's turning around the corner. Yeah, dude. Action is getting a good score from me. Unfortunately, the first half action was a little slower to develop, but I can't ding it that much because of how good this last like 2/3 is.
Yeah, and if you think about like the attacks that happened as like the action of the first half, like those were pretty well descriptive and engaging and interesting. So
yeah,
as I'm reading this, I thought like, wow, like Scott loses, like
yeah,
they get away,
right.
they get away.
Yeah.
You know, we've kind of already talked about the ending in well, I guess we talked about the very ending. We haven't talked about his Gibraltar yet. But I was like, oh wow, like they're just gonna end it like this. But no, we don't get that. We get a pretty awesome. I get chills when I read things like the send off, you know, the funeral for Bullet Bob, and you know we got a similar description of like the Navy SEAL tradition in multiple Jack Carr books. Like I just think back to that scene of like American Sniper, right, where they're hammering the trident into the casket, you know, and the fact that in this one we get the lone Blackhawk that comes in, drops the the fast rope cord, and then does a quick tail out so fast that you
the coffin's
by the
gone.
time that everyone's focused on that, and then the coffins leave as like a final exfil. That was pretty cool, pretty like chilling, you know.
Yeah, I felt with watching that scene the way I did in the Terminalist when the Marines are coming, when the SEALs are coming home. Yeah. Well, you get some good language here. I love the quote from one of Bullet Bob's. I guess he was one of his teammates, really close friends, who gives the eulogy, and part of what he says is this message when he was having to bury his own guys, and he'd go to the locker room and have to be the one to pack up their stuff and package it and take it to the families. And he's sitting there and he remembers how Bullet Bob was the one who came up, sat next to him, put his arm around him, and just listened and sat with him, you know, because, man, imagine having to pack up your best friends, your teammates' gear, and know it's your job to kind of deliver that to the family. And Bullet Bob was there, and Bullet Bob was giving him some words of comfort and said, life isn't fair. Keep doing what you're doing and make sure you're doing the very best you can. And man, just what a scene. And earlier, actually, Scott even draws strength from Bullet Bob getting hit and going down. Right after Bob bleeds out and dies in the garage, it just motivates Scott to the next level. Like, he's not going to let this mission fail anymore. There's a bigger reason to operate. And Brad writes, quote, he felt guilty beyond words, and while part of him wanted to bend over, puke his guts out, and mourn the loss of his friend, who had been like an older brother to him, another part wanted to bathe in the blood of the people who had just killed Bob Harrington. It was from that part of himself that he summoned the strength to keep moving. And then even earlier, there's one other story. I think it's when we first meet Bullet Bob in this book, and there's the story of like he had to move his whole regiment, or they were traveling somewhere, and he noticed some guys couldn't keep up and they couldn't carry their rucksack and they were like dying, and he carried it for them.
They weren't going to make it there for like the rifle salute. It was like a training exercise, and then some high brass were there. And so he saw it. And even though like it was part of the thing where they were supposed to grab their rifles and carry the rucksack all the way there and then, you know, do a salute, he said, screw that. It's all about the team. And he grabbed the rifles and then sort of ran ahead of them and then handed them the rifles as they went. And no one was the wiser. Dude.
And the lesson was, it doesn't matter how you got there. It matters that you all got there together.
Yes.
And Bullet Bob would never brag about it.
I have to say, Bullet Bob is probably my favorite character, like, besides Scott, that we've gotten so far.
I think so.
I think the Troll is eventually going to, like, overtake, like, probably one of my favorite characters in the entire, you know, series.
Gary Lawler.
Yeah, and Gary. But, you know, we've seen a lot of these characters that are like one-offs that, you know, come in for a book and either, you know, pass away, die, or we are just never heard of again. And I feel like you can connect to them, but sometimes we don't get enough character development to like really connect with them, appreciate them. But the little time that we spend with Bob here, that Brad does an awesome job, like laying out his backstory, giving the character nuance, really developing this character well, to make that death at the end, like you're upset as a reader, and to make that the funeral like that emotional as a reader. You know, again, this writing in this book was just really top notch.
Yeah. And to think the whole team that saves the day, the whole team operating, is part of Bullet Bob's friends at the VFW, that adds another dimension of how important he was. And the fact that they were all PTSD patients who needed each other to get through it. Man, just, again, something special is going on with Brad here. This is, I think, a turning point in him as a writer, pulling on these, striking these chords, something I don't think he's done yet in the series, and it's something that will keep up, especially when we get to the old man and the team and Lara, and just like he can have that level of emotional depth, complexity, and nuance that we've been craving, and I don't think we've seen yet through the first 5 books until now. So,
yeah, agreed.
Damn, this book is big for the series.
Yeah, so there's only like 2 other things I really want to talk about. It's like the Gibraltar scene with, Scott's there. They allow like the nuclear exchange to happen. That's how they, sort of then they allow Muhammad bin Muhammad to leave the exchange, but they're able to take out and get the material, and Scott's supposed to be the one to come in and clean it up. But before he can do this, the troll's there to enact his revenge, and the dogs. And we get the infamous, sort of the beginning of what's going to be this long relationship of why the troll, comes to respect Scott, is because he saves Argus, right?
Mm-hmm. And Ali is there too, so he steps out of the shadows and thinks he has the troll cornered, shoots the dog, and I'm just on the edge of my seat like, shit, Scott already lost in New York. These guys already got away. They now got the troll in their sights. I was like, damn, we just can't get a win today. And then Scott gets that win. He shoots the place up. I think he shoots Ali in the head. He turns, hits Muhammad in the legs, twice in the legs. Then, oh my God.
Talk about another torture scene. Yeah.
A little unnecessary, if you will, because after the pepper spray in the urethra, I didn't need any more torture, but I wanted Muhammad to suffer.
It was for Bob.
He did it for Bob, yeah. These beetles, he put the vial with the beetle in it up to his ear. Some sort of beetle that's known to like eat brains and make you go crazy. And so he holds a lighter or a match up to the vial, so the beetle scurries out of it, goes into the ear canal. This beetle is eating Muhammad's brains, and then just to finish him off, he shoots him in the stomach, which apparently is a really painful way to die. So
slow, painful. Yeah.
Ugh.
I just kept thinking of that one scene from The Mummy with like all the scarabs coming out,
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
I thought of like a little scarab, like, or a big scarab, like just crawling into my ear and, eating my brains. Oh, that scene. I don't like bugs that much. So like, that scene was just, oh.
And I do not want Brendan Fraser, a young one, to play Scot Harvath. And I don't want him as the old one to play Gary Lawler. No.
Yeah. No. That's funny.
Oh, really other cool scene is Scott picks up the dog, administers first aid, bandages him up, and walks away with the dog over his shoulders. And he has this eerie feeling that the troll could have shot him. And the only reason he got away was because he realized he was caring for the dog and going to save him.
Right.
And yeah, that just hints at the relationship to come. I don't remember the turn or the meet between the two and how it all goes down, because when they meet up, it must be explosive at first, but there are seeds planted that these two are going to respect each other as operators.
And I feel like we get one more little like Thorism treat at the very end with this Bishop's Gatehouse, which will eventually be, now Scott's, home base and his house for the future. That house is so cool. Like the fact that one, the president gives him, this house for what, $1 a year in
Yeah.
perpetuity. It's this house right on the water, Old Navy,
South of Mount Vernon.
South of Mount Vernon. It just held
It was like archives,
classified document.
naval intelligence
Yep.
archives.
Really, really cool. Like just a little tidbit thrown in at the very end.
Yep. And another tidbit, you know who shows up to help him mow and clean up the house?
We see Gordo
Gordo Villano. Did you want more of him? I know he's going to be around a little bit, but when he was just a side note at the end, I'm like, why didn't we call him in?
Well, I think it was nice that like you kind of saw, all right, the attacks really did happen and no one can get on this island. And so Scott is really left with whoever he's got, himself and whoever he's got. So, I felt like if you tried somehow to sneak in the regular players, it would have been almost like unbelievable, this idea. So I kind of like that we sort of, Scott was out of his element. So
yeah, it's true. Well, before we really wrap up with the scorecard, and we have to judge a cover by the book, a few questions for you. And I don't want to ask this one because it's exactly what we're saying. We love the team up, but do you wish there's a little more consistency to the characters? Like, by this time in Mitrap, I feel like he's got his boys. He's got Hackett and Strobel, and eventually Joe Maz. And I'm just wondering, do you want to see more consistency between the people around Scott who he's, one, operating with, and two, the ladies in his life? Or do you like this kind of turnover, every book's kind of fresh, it stands alone kind of feel?
Yeah, I think that you could probably say that is a Thorism, although I think it's gonna settle out soon once, the troll becomes a main player as a helper, and then definitely once he, joins the Carlton group and has all of them in its behemoth of resources at his command. I don't mind it as much. I guess I enjoyed this one here because the characters are actually fleshed out. I felt like some of the other books, the characters were sort of take them or leave them. But I think it also shows, right, we're seeing Scott's progression from different jobs, which we never really saw Mitch do, right? Mitch joined the CIA and until last book, and I guess one other time where he had to pretend like he left the CIA, has been a part of the CIA. So it would make sense that he has this like cast of people, and then every now and then we get a one-off character. But here, like, it starts out he's in the Secret Service, and then he moves into this OIIA position, and then he's going to leave that and go into the private sector. So it kind of makes sense that not all the same players would be around and he would have access to them. So
yeah,
but point. I like how they, like, at the very end he brought in a Vigliano to show that like there is some continuity to this universe, and that these characters still exist. They're there. They may pop up time and time again. So
yeah. All right, good point. Last question before we get into the scorecard. Who was the big bad here? Is it the troll? Is it one of the terrorists? And ultimately, is it whoever the leak was, the traitor who gave the troll the information? Was Stanton the traitor in this case who sold the secrets from the secret plan because the troll was either paying him or maybe going to do some power sharing with him over this information? Who's the real big bad here?
Yeah, so what, the information, right, was all like phone records and interactions between like Al-Qaeda and stuff like that?
Well, the data Operation Driftwood was processing at these centers were like secret spy things that we had on other world leaders. Remember these
world
centers?
Leaders. It was world leaders, right?
The whole purpose was to get dirt on other governments and their world leaders. So not just general surveillance for terrorism purposes, but almost blackmail that we could use against other governments down the road.
Right. And so does the one guy, the defense secretary, ever say that Stanton was the leak, or do we not know yet?
I don't know. I mean,
that was the one thing I was a little confused on at the end. But I assume that, one, why else would he fucking kill his compatriot, his right-hand man, essentially, in this plot,
and then shoot out with Gary?
Other than the fact that, I mean, if this information gets out and he's at the head of it, he's definitely going to jail. But I felt like there's something else this idea that he is a traitor and he's not only doing this, but also giving up information to other people. Either that or the troll is just so good that he has the ability to hack in and, figured out this plot on his own, as thinking about like who is the big bad per se, I don't know. I guess Ali and Muhammad bin Muhammad are the big bad. But I think what Brad really wants to do is set up the troll as this enigma, right? Is he a bad guy? Is he not a bad guy? Is he the one that shot Tracy, or is it someone else? Obviously, I guess we know as a reader that the one who shot is someone who was in Brad's past, or Scott's past. Sorry, I keep doing that. But yeah, I don't know. I think you could go with either Ali, Muhammad bin Muhammad as the big bad, or the troll.
Yeah,
the troll's almost like an anti-hero. He's self-serving, definitely.
It's kind of a cliffhanger, but I really, really want to know more about the troll's information dealing empire. Like, that was set up so well, and all these secrets he now has. I just, like we said last time, Brad created a character in the troll that you just want so much more of, and we're gonna get it.
I feel like you hit gold. Writers hit gold like that. Very few. Not often. Sorry.
Yeah.
And Brad saw what he had and rolled with it, and I'm very glad he did.
Yep. You know where else we hit gold? In these covers, man. Dude, I am all about the cover game here for Takedown.
Yes. And it's funny, we in pre-pro, we were talking, we sort of like, sometimes we do the scorecard on the fly, but sometimes we like to, get a little read beforehand. And so we were talking about the covers, and we're like, they're cool. Well, two of them are I think B is really cool with the Statue of Liberty.
Yep.
I love that whole line of paperbacks. I have those. I'm very sentimental to them. I don't really like that they've gone to these new updated ones in cover C. However, the cover C on this one, at first I was like, what the hell is this cover? You see this like shape that kind of looks like a ship. I'm like, there's no ships. But then I zoom in on it to get a better look.
Oh yeah.
And I realize that it's like one of those like almost like a street map, hazy street map of Manhattan. Oh. And you can see the points at to where the attack, like the bridges and the tunnels, right?
Yep.
And I was like, wow, this cover is pretty awesome.
It's dope. I looked at cover C. I was like, kind of strange. And this red star. It's making me think of communism. This has nothing to do with Russia. And then I saw that map of Manhattan, particularly with the tunnels and bridges so clearly shown. And I was so impressed. This is one of my favorite all-time covers. Once I noticed that, for a sequence of covers or a series of covers I haven't really liked that much, the new releases of the Brad Thors, this is by far the best one. And
definitely,
it's slamming. If you don't say C is the best cover here, something's wrong with you, because it's unbelievable. I like B. You're right. Once you see the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, and the skyline silhouetted in the words Takedown.
Yeah, I like that. It's cool.
B is banger. A is so cool, and as an original release, I would have really liked it, seeing it in a bookstore, but it's lacking a little something. It doesn't hint at New York.
Generic.
It's generic.
It's how many like this style cover do we see on the original Vince Flynn runs of
exactly.
An American flag that's either shattered or shot with a bullet, or that's burning. It's just it signals some sort of distress, some sort of attack. So. Yeah. Very of the times, right? 2000 and would this come in 2005, right? So
yeah. It doesn't speak to New York City, though, and if we're judging a book by a cover by the book, it doesn't tell me much about the story. Although the colors are cool. Colors are really cool. D, E, and F. Can we just skip? Can we just not even mention them?
All I have to say is D is kind of interesting. We're not big fans of putting like actual dudes on covers
with faces. Can't have the face
with faces.
Hands are okay, guns are okay, no faces.
D's not bad. What is D? It's all in English. So is that like the British copy?
D's pretty bad.
No, you really you don't like D? E is pretty bad.
This trench coat looking thing, it doesn't make any sense to me. Doesn't make any sense to me.
All right, let's skip it. The A, B, and C are so good that
let's not even talk about them. Yeah,
they're international. It's okay.
Thank you. I kind of applaud you for wanting to try, but it wasn't worth it. There's no need.
I don't want to bring this book down. No negativity here.
Correct. All right. Scorecard, action and plot, my friend. We got to think of this book as a whole because it's very clearly a tale of two books, or a first third and a second 2/3. But all of that considered, how the book gripped you, the race to the finish, all the action happening. What do you give the score out of 10 on action and plot?
I wanted to go 10-10.
Me too.
But I just couldn't. So I'm going 9 on action. Dinging it a point for the scarcity we got in the first third to half. And I'm going 10 on plot because the plot was banging in this book. It had me hooked from the start to finish. The mystery boxes, we had probably the only thing we were confused on, and we probably just because we missed it because there was so damn much action at the end, was who was the traitor. Yeah. All the mystery boxes were explained. We fully gripped. Yeah, no, nothing more I can say about it. It was awesome plot.
100%. I went 10 on plot. All the mystery boxes paid off. They came together at the right moments. The pacing on the reveal of the story was beautifully crafted. And so that was a 10. Action, correct. I wanted to ding it a little bit on the first third, not really having my attention that much. I only gave it half a point off, 9.5, because of how good the rest of the action was. Libya, Grand Central Terminal, Lincoln Tunnel, Waldorf Astoria, Gibraltar, just over and over again. So because of that, my buy-in is high too. 4.5.
Yeah, same.
I wanted to go 5 out of 5, and then I remembered how I wasn't digging the early New York City scenes. Pre-Central Park scenes. That random motorcycle gang, they fought some guys outside a motorcycle shop or some weird shit.
It was weird.
There was a marking on one of them. I was like, it's little tiny things like that. 4.5 out of buy-in.
That and the fact that, I don't know, just like this my ding of why I put a 4.5 is just a little convenient that Scott was in New York City when this attack happened. But, obviously you got to have that if you want to have the story. So, yeah. What about the bad guys and the good guys, Mike?
Again, I thought nearly perfect. I'm kind of going to nitpick, though, because to get that 5 out of 5, it's got to be so well-rounded. Well, with the bad guys, while I really love the troll, 5 out of 5 on how he's rolled out, I had to take a little bit off on the terrorists. The terrorists and the Chechen, who's who and who's motivating who, just were not the level of, let's say, a Rafik Aziz. They were not a Louis Gold. They aren't right. They aren't these figures you're dying to be around 3-4 books because they're so good. They were good for one book, but they didn't raise to that next level. So 4.5 on the bad guys. How about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. I think we weren't fully invested in wanting to have them around as villains for a long time. And then the one we are is the troll. But he's really not a bad guy. Exactly. we ultimately know that he's not going to be a bad guy. In this book, he's a bad guy, or at least someone who's out for himself. So yeah, that's why I got to ding it. The good guys, on the other hand, I had to go 5. Dude, just one, we get awesome Lawler. We get awesome Rutledge. Really digging the chief of staff. But you could go 5 alone on just the motley crew that Scott has, yes. Helping him. Tracy Hastings, right? Bullet Bob. Cates, Morgan, just... And even some of the Marines that we get introduced to, like you said, yes. Just these minor characters, and even while you didn't play a major role, the character of the fake DIA agent, Mike Jaffe, he was an interesting character,
yeah.
And ultimately on the side of good. So the good guys were really good.
100%. I dinged it initially because I was so caught up on this idea of I want the team. I want Gordo. I want all the other boys. Oh, well, who's the guy with the Scottish accent?
Oh, well, he's fake Scottish accent.
Treywick.
But,
Skip Treywick.
Treywick.
Fake accent.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like being a little nostalgic for those guys. But you're right. The New York City attacks, there's no way you can rely on them. Scott's got to find new people. Bullet Bob and his PTSD group is so tight. I had to bump it to that perfect 5. This is a great team up, even if it's a short while team up, not the like standard characters I'm hoping to see 5 books from now. But the way they gelled and came together and the team dynamics, fantastic. And each one of them was an individual. They weren't just a generic macho muscle and brawn kind of character because you need muscle on the team. You need a shooter. It just really worked how they were all put together. So I did the 5. I upped it. You convinced me.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Setting, we were both, I think, still a little lacking on New York City, as great as it was to be there. 4 out of 5. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think like what can elevate it is some of the later stuff we got. The action in Grand Central, the church, the Lincoln Tunnel. Yeah, even like we were starting to get there with the Central Park scene. And then like we get some decent descriptions of Gibraltar early on in Canada. So setting's always going to be pretty high, but here we couldn't give the 5 that I think we've given him 5s on settings pretty much every book. Maybe not Path, but
couldn't do it here.
Even the last book, like Blowback, we were pretty much down on that entire book, except for the setting was like freaking amazing, like just the description of the Alps and stuff like that. So yeah, he's got a good ding here. The covers, we already talked about them, and I think like maybe if the internationals were better, we could go full 5 out of 5. But
right, exactly.
A, B, and C alone, you're getting a 4.5 from me.
Yep. B and C are enough to carry it to a 4 or beyond, a 4.5, because C is just so good. If that original was a little more unique, a little more tailored to this story, and not a generic one, it could have reached. It's like a 4.8. If we were allowed to do that, if we were, but we're not. We got to stick to the rules here. So 4.5. Yeah. Free space though. What are you giving a perfect 5 out of 5 in this book?
I get to go first this time, and I'm going to pick Bullet Bob.
Oh, you took it from me.
Bob. I know. I had a feeling you were gonna do him.
Yeah.
I don't know. He's just probably one of the best crafted individual characters from an individual book that we've gotten. I would say like even some of the individual characters we got in like a Vince Flynn or Kyle book. We don't get that nuance unless if you're really going to put the investment into having that character development. Odds are you're going to keep them around for a couple books. Yeah. But obviously you had the stakes, and it was a really good character.
Since you took Bullet Bob, I will take the other low-hanging fruit here and go with the Troll. We've hashed it out. We talked about it. Man, the Troll needs those props. So 5 out of 5.
I have a feeling this is not going to be the last time the Troll is the free space.
Yeah, he's going to have a lot of winners. You could have made the argument in Rising Tiger, how he goes friggin' badass protecting his home front.
His lady, yeah.
All right, I mean, that's some pretty high scores. A 46.5 from you, and that's a 47 from me. 1 full point of that was the setting alone, and then a couple of other halves sprinkled in there, so this was pretty close to perfect. The last half of this book was darn close to a 50 out of 50.
Yeah, definitely. I don't know. I'm glad. I'm glad we got to talk this book. It's bringing me back into the series.
Absolutely.
A little down after the last book, but we're back in.
This ignited the fire. This one really put the passion in me to want to keep season 2 going. The Scot Harvath podcast. We're gonna get to the end, folks.
We're gonna do it. We're completionists on this podcast, so we're gonna do it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so the next time you hear us on this feed, we will be doing The First Commandment. Again, we're getting into the stretch of books where I don't quite remember the plot. I'm sure as soon as I start reading the first couple chapters, I'll remember it. But yeah, so the next time on this feed, you have The First Commandment. But until then, you can go to our other feed, No Limits, the Thriller podcast. Check out our Ryan Steck interview while you're there. No, actually, that one's on our first feed, the Mitch Rapp pod.
Mitch Rapp, yeah.
But on the Thriller podcast feed, we're going to have our interview with Andrews and Wilson, as well as potentially dig into another Jack Carr book, because I'm interested to see what happens after, because I have not read Savage Son yet. So
Yeah, dude, the book a lot of people consider the best in the series, so I can't wait for you to get into it.
All right. Again, we want to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, Mark, and Rod. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Insta at thrillerpodcast. And in the words of Bullet Bob, keep doing what you're doing.